G'day, I'm Dave Westman from Flat Cat Marketing, and today I'm with CEO and founder of Neurocapability, a business that works with organisations and leaders to improve psychological safety, which is a topic we'll get to talk about today, and also to improve employee experiences in the workplace. They also happen to deliver the world's only accredited advanced diploma of neuroscience of leadership. So welcome to the show, Linda. And is that a fair summary of what you do?
Yes, thanks for having me, Dave, and that's a great summary.
And you've been doing this for quite a while.
Yeah, I started looking at the application of neuroscience to leadership and change management and psychological safety. It kind of commenced in about 2006. So yeah, I've been looking at it for a long time.
Excellent. So just on that psychological safety, it might not be a term that some people are familiar with. What exactly is that about? What does that entail?
Psychological safety is a really key component of people's experience at work. So when people feel psychologically safe, they feel free to speak up and speak out. They feel that there are high levels of trust and mutual respect. And so it's what we want to see in workplaces, because when people feel psychologically safe, they're at their productive best, and we're also giving them a good employee experience, which is really important. Particularly given the number of mental health issues that we're experiencing in both in the workplace and outside of the workplace.
Excellent. So we thought Linda might have some interesting, based on that particularly, might have some interesting insights on the bushfires that we've seen kick off the new year in Australia, which have been tragic events across a couple of states in particular. Have you been watching the rolling coverage on that, Linda?
Absolutely. I think that it would be very hard to miss it, and it's something that's touched me really personally and deeply, as I'm sure it has many people in Australia, and we're seeing now throughout the world. It's been a really tragic series of events that has had some really profound effects on individuals and families and also on wildlife. So I think we can't forget our furry friends. There's a lot of concern about that as well.
It's certainly not just devastating, but it's had a big emotional toll on people. I've seen people watching some of that coverage, and people are moved to tears over this, and it's about people that we don't even know. What sort of impact? I guess there's different levels of impact. First of all, what sort of impact does it have on people who are directly affected? What sort of things are their emotions? What are they going through?
Well, it's interesting, Dave, when you say, people have been personally impacted and had emotions. I too have had emotions. I've cried at footage that I've watched, and I don't know any of these people, and I don't have any family or friends that are directly affected, and yet I felt it deeply and personally.
Exactly.
So I know that many people I'm speaking to are also crying when they're watching the footage, because it's incredibly distressing. And the impact of that on people, it can be quite profound. So I think the thing that we need to understand is that this event is impacting, every person in Australia and beyond Australia in the world. So, our hearts go out to the people that are directly affected and their friends and family, but the impact is much broader than that. And I think that's what we need to understand. It's impacting on, children who are also really concerned about climate change and concerned about animals. So its impact is quite significant, and we feel that sadness. And because we're seeing footage constantly on the news or through social media, we're constantly having those feelings. And I was watching my daughter, who is 21, and last night she said to me, "I can't watch this news anymore, Mum." And she said, "Because every time I watch it, I cry." And I had to have a conversation with her about that, because I was concerned about the impact that it was having on her and the emotional toll. And I think we have to understand that that's happening to many, many people. And the part that kind of concerns me is this isn't going to stop tomorrow or next week. We're at the very early stages of the bushfire season, so there are likely to be ongoing impacts and more devastating fires. So I think we have to be looking at what are the ways that we can look after ourselves to kind of protect us against feeling this emotional impact, and actually leading to kind of what we would refer to as compassion fatigue, where we actually start to get so fatigued by it that we start saying, I can't watch it anymore. And, we want to switch off from it. And it doesn't mean that we're not still showing empathy, but I think people are saying, I can't do this anymore. It is hurting so much.
That's an interesting point, because I do remember in other large-scale news events, such as when Diana died, or the World Trade Center was blown up, in the way there was rolling news coverage 24 hours a day for day after day after day. And I recall people getting sick of it, but feeling a little bit guilty about getting sick of it. Is that what you mean by compassion fatigue?
Yeah, I think that's people want to show that they care and that they have empathy, and we're kind of drawn to looking at it. And even though we don't really want to look at it because we can see that it's having a negative impact on us, we're drawn to looking at it because it's also a way, I think, that people are trying to show their support. So when we're commenting on social media, we're showing that we care, but we're not giving ourselves any time to have some downtime and have a little bit of a rest from it, because it is so impactful on us.
So how important is it to, when people feel those emotions, to express them in some way, or to feel like they're doing something, or to deal with them in some sort of practical way? Like, how does that manifest itself, and how important is it?
One of the things that we've learned through how the brain works, and from particularly social cognitive neuroscience, is that when we actually talk about our feelings, it makes it better. So, we used to think if you talk about your feelings, that makes it worse. I guess that it's important that people label their emotions and actually share how they're feeling. I feel sad. We're seeing a lot of anger. So people are, I feel angry. We're seeing people perhaps even have feelings of guilt. My house didn't burn down, but my two neighbours' house, both of those burnt down, and I feel a bit guilty that I haven't lost my home. So it's really important to allow people for opportunities to voice their feelings and label those feelings and those emotions. I think once people have done that, we also need to support them to also think about things in different ways. So, for example, when I was talking with my daughter, who's quite passionate about climate change and the environment, I said to her, I understand that you're really upset and this is really deeply hurting you and affecting you. Are there some things that you can see that could be positives that come out of this? And I'm not trying to diminish what's happening to people, but I think we also have to focus on what are the stories of good? What are the things that we could also focus on our attention on to balance the sadness and the hopelessness and the overwhelm. And for her, it was she was able to say, well, maybe finally this is the wake up call that we need to start dealing with climate change, more seriously. And I think the other thing we need to look at is it's showing in very impressive stories of courage. It's showing that people do care, and not just in Australia, but from around the world. We're seeing people not able to do anything else besides, make a donation of money, but they're also sending messages of support. So that's been wonderful. I think that, it kind of gives me goosebumps when I think about how people have just, and it's kind of, I don't think it's uniquely Australian, but I think we've seen it in a few significant events in Australia where people they just want to help and they want to, so let's be proud of that. I think thinking about those things and balancing out the devastation is really important.
So one of those feel-good stories that has come out of the disaster has been the donations, and I see today there's more news of $1 million donations coming in from celebrities from around the world, but Celeste Barber in particular was across all news channels with what she did. How did you see that?
I thought that was a really interesting how that played out. In fact, my daughter showed me the Celeste's Instagram, And very early on, and I don't know if people can still see it, but there was a kind of a letter or a message from her mother-in-law, and it was a very it shared a story in the most touching way, and I think that that's what started people being very touched by this story. And I believe her initial target was $30,000, and when I last looked, it was at $45 million, and so I think people have been very touched by it, and what's really interesting about how she has continued to tell the story and gain support is she's done it in a really authentic and genuine way. So if you look at her Instagram posts, there's times when she is crying, when she's showing anger, when she's showing joy, and it's very authentic. And I think people tap into that authenticity. And what's been wonderful is she's been able to use her celebrity status, I guess, to then leverage and get that message out across the world. And donations are coming from all over the world for people that have never even been to Australia. I mean, I can understand, when you've been to Australia and you've seen what a beautiful country it is, but it's coming from people who have never been here, but they want to show their support.
It probably did help too when the international news was covering the story with the photograph of the kangaroo hopping across the view of the burning building, and of course the pictures, the tragic pictures of those koalas that are burnt and being rescued from the bushfire. It's just, that really does appeal to people. They, in overseas countries, that's sort of the signifier for Australia is that wildlife.
Absolutely, and I think people are very when they see those images, they're very affected by it. In the same way as people are very affected when they see people returning to their burnt down home and that they've lost all their possessions. So it does. It touches people's hearts. The images and the videos and the footage has been incredibly powerful. I've just had some neighbours return from the UK, and it's been the headline story over in the UK. So it's obviously a headline story in many countries around the world.
So obviously those images help drive donations, which is a wonderful thing to collect the donations. But in addition to that, when people make a donation, it's not just about giving money. Like what's that doing to them psychologically?
One of the things we know that when we volunteer or when we give gifts to charity, it actually makes us feel good. It elicits a reward response. So people feel good in doing that. And in fact, I was looking at some of the comments in Celeste's feed, and people are saying things like, I've donated twice. So people aren't even donating once. They're actually, because I think they started to then feel part of a community of people that cared and that wanted to donate, and they want to continue to feel part of that supportive community.
So now that the year is underway and we've got a lot of people returning to work this week and next week, and a lot of those people are emotionally drained from such massive exposure to the disaster, what sort of state are they mentally in when they go back to work? And does that have an impact on the workplace, the organisation that they're in?
I think it's going to have a massive impact that we probably have underestimated. Generally, we look forward to the Christmas break as a time to have what I call a brain break, top up our fuel tank and revitalise ourselves and have a break away from work. I guess what's happened in this period is that people perhaps haven't done some of those things that they would normally do to have a break. So, people have been involved in the in volunteering, or they have been, watching a lot of the stories, and so they haven't then maybe done some of the things that we know revitalise us, like walks in nature. I mean, obviously we wouldn't be walking through the bush in some of these fire-affected areas. So some of the things that people would have done to rejuvenate themselves, they perhaps haven't done to the same extent. And so they're also then coming back to work with those emotions of sadness and grief. And I think we need to be really mindful of how do we support people when they come back to the workplace, because some people have been directly impacted, but I think the impact it goes beyond the people that have been just directly impacted. It is impacting everyone. And, to just expect people to come to work and put on a happy face, I think that's not going to work. We really need to be actually providing people with the opportunity to check in with them and see how they're going. Are you okay? And did you have anyone that was directly impacted? So really giving people the opportunity to talk about it. And I know people might think, well, that's going to take away from productivity. But guess what? People are not productive when they don't have the opportunity to share how they're feeling. And when they're trying to suppress those feelings, we're unproductive. So I guess my message and as you know, I work a lot in the leadership space, is leaders, think about what is your strategy to support your people when they're coming back to work. How are you going to ensure that you're checking in with them? And if you're noticing signs of distress, what are your strategies for supporting those people? And one of the really interesting things is that we all like to give advice. In fact, we're biologically programmed to give advice. And so we tend to want to give advice for the things that would work for us if we're in that situation. And my message to leaders would be, if you see people are distressed, is to ask them, how can I support you? What is the best way to support you? Because for some people, if you're a hugger, you'll want to go up and give that person a big hug. Now, not everyone likes that big hug, but they might like you to make them a cup of coffee, or if they're feeling really overwhelmed, to say, hey, is there some work I could help you with? So I guess my message to people is, think about, we've extended our support and our love to the people that are devastated by this. Make sure you don't just do that outside of the workplace. We need to be doing that in the workplace as well. And ensure that you listen to people. If people are feeling upset, let them talk and listen. Don't interrupt, and don't try and offer your suggestions or advice about what you think might work for them. Just listen. And if necessary, you may want to also look at referring people to areas for support. And there are a number of services where you can refer people to if you think that they're experiencing high levels of distress. I think we also need to look at how we're going to manage our natural curiosity and wanting to continue to monitor what's going on in with regard to the bushfires. So how are we going to allow people time to still keep up to date with that, but not become consumed by it, so that it keeps eliciting those emotions that are going to mean that we're not fully present at work.
So I know your business has quite a focus on taking neuroscience, which is quite a complex science, and turning that into practical applications. So what I'm hearing is one of your practical applications is to let people in the workplace be momentarily less productive and just talk to each other, the water cooler talk, just have that conversation about what you've seen and how you felt.
Yeah, look, I think it's also appropriate, even, we spend so much time in meetings. Can we quarantine 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting just to check in with each other and say, hey, is everyone okay? This has been a massive event and we're all deeply affected by it. Let's just, make sure that we're looking out for each other. And so I think that's entirely appropriate. And, one of the things that I often say to the people that I work with is, sometimes we have to go slow to go fast. So sometimes actually stopping and doing some of those things actually will mean that we can bring our best productive self to work.
That's it. You mentioned a minute ago, or sort of indicated that different people are affected in different ways, or they respond differently. Is there way, like, do leaders, are they aware of that, or is that something they need to ask, or how do you sort of know how to treat people differently?
I think we have to understand that every person's experience of it will be different, and to not assume that the way that we would want to be treated is the way that that person would want to be treated. And look, I say this beyond this event, I think it's really important to get, the best leaders know their people and they know what to do to support them. So, and if you don't, ask them, just asking a question like, what is it you need from me? Is there a way that I can support you? What's the best way that we as a team can support you? Just those questions, I think, can allow people to express what's going to be the best for them. And some people might say, hey, I just want you to leave me alone. I actually just want some quiet time. And that's okay as well. But we won't be able to support people unless we know what are the best ways that they like to be supported.
So from this event, I mean, there will be other events and other things that have a similar sort of impact. But from this one in particular, do you see long-term impacts in the workplace? Is there likely to be long-term impact on the individual and or the relationship between the leader and other team members in the way that this is handled?
I think that, like many major events, and if we think about 9/11, people relive the story in their head and can, in the worst case scenarios, end up with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think, this is something I would be particularly concerned of for the people that were directly fighting the fires. They have seen things that none of us would ever want to witness. So I think, because we keep seeing it again and again and again in the media, we're exposed again and again to it. So the impact can be quite lasting for people. And as I said, because it's not over, we haven't got torrential rain falling at the moment, putting those fires out. It's something that's going to continue to be with us, and we form memories around that. And the memories that we form around that, if they're associated with anger and blame and all of those negative emotions and grief, then every time we pull that memory up into our conscious attention, we re-experience those emotions. So I guess one of my key messages to people is try and I spoke about this earlier, try and think about some of the positive things. Like, what are the things that you can attach to those memories that are the stories of good? For example, one of the emotions that you want to put away is pride. We should all, as Australians, feel proud of the people that have been responding and the empathy shown by our nation and by people throughout the world. And we need to find those so that it counterbalances those negative emotions, so that when we bring back those memories, we're also remembering the good as well as some of the things that are really challenging and traumatic about those events.
Okay, that's some tremendous insights there, Linda, and I think we're having a few audio difficulties, but so we might wrap it up. But it's not the best way to start a year with the bushfires, but some of those insights and practical advice you've given us certainly is going to be useful for people going back to work and trying to process everything and get back to some sort of normality. So we'll put some links to how you can donate and some other useful links on the website. So I'm sure Linda will post this on her website, which is neurocapability.com.au, and we'll certainly post it on Flat Cat Marketing's website at flatcat.com.au. And thanks very much for your time, Linda, and we look forward to chatting soon on some other great topics. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.